This is a special interview series organized by the Kootneeti, who is a media partner with COVINTS for their upcoming virtual counter-terrorism expo, scheduled between January 28th to 30th, 2022. COVINTS hashtag Counter 2022 is a platform for world's leading defense and security stakeholders to seek knowledge, share expertise, and promote capabilities to foster counterterrorism solutions and global cooperation. In this special series, today we have Honorable Noel Hadjimichael, who is currently the chair of Defense and Security Circle at National Liberal Club in the United Kingdom.
There has been a constant fear of evolving tech exploitation by the terror groups. We all know how Islamic State has capitalized on the new technologically driven landscape by remotely inspiring and directing attacks. How you see this evolution as well as the countermeasures taken by various government and the private entities. I am calling the private entities here because now even they are the stakeholders in such countermeasures and are playing a crucial role in having something which actually relates with the scheme of this counter 2022 event as well.
Well, I think it's a very good question that you've raised. And I think the best answer is actually an answer that came from Lieutenant General V.K. Ahluwalia, who wrote in 2017 about the drivers of terrorism in India. And that was reported in the media in 2017 and has been continued by a range of people to be seen as a critical assessment. When you look at the terrorism threat in India, one of the absolutely simple and very observable facts is that easy access to sophisticated weapons and disruptive advances in technology, in particular cyber, has allowed organizations of extremists to mask their identity, to facilitate real-time secure communications, and to obtain a flow of funding, and in itself to actually revolutionize and upscale their abilities to damage civil society, democracy, critical infrastructure, and of course the state. The reality of the counterterrorism challenge in a country like India is the three elements of both cross-border terrorism, terrorism in the hinterlands, and also the normalization of extremism and extreme violence as part of political ideologies. And for the world's largest democracy, that is a very big challenge.
Moving ahead to the one of major technology used by the terror groups, which we all know is automation in defense industry especially. Terrorist groups are increasingly using evolving technologies, including drones and elementary artificial intelligence in attack. As it continues to be weaponized, AI could prove a formidable threat, allowing adversaries, including non-state actors, to automate killing on a massive scale. What are your comments on this and how to prevent such technologies from getting exploited, which is easily available in DIY format over internet? Like everyone can assemble such technologies even while sitting at home and going to the local market.
Well, I think it's very interesting that as recently as May 2020, now that may sound a long time ago, but because of the global pandemic, so much of the last 18 months has been lost to research and thinking and engagement, because we've been struggling with very much a scientific and medical challenge, but this has not forestalled or minimized the activity of extremist groups or those seeking political violence. But it's interesting that NATO, in a review by Dr. Antonio Miseroli, only less than 2 years ago, recognized that there's this exponential technological explosion or progress, especially in the digital domain, which is affecting all our lives. We know that these devices are unhealthy for us, and yet we are hooked up to them. Emerging from the new way of living, in particular the democratization of technology, you made the very good point that high specification technology is now available in a retail environment. It is no longer big corporations and big governments that have the virtual monopoly on technology. It's created a new dilemma for the military, for the security establishment, and I think famously in 2017, when giving a speech to technology students in Moscow, of all people, President Vladimir Putin famously argued whichever country, whichever political force becomes the leader in artificial intelligence research, drone technology, and this emerging post-digital military space will become the dominant player. And we know that the costs of drones and the cost of cyber offensive capabilities keeps falling, so that a group based in Yemen can attack Abu Dhabi airport, or a group based in the hinterlands of India can attack a location 50 miles away with very little opportunity to be caught, observed, or captured. And it's that level of challenge that I think we face, because whilst technology used to be the preserve of the state, and it was armed forces, official armed forces. So we have countries like India, like Pakistan, like Russia, like the United Kingdom, with professional, high capability armed forces. It is now political groups, dissidents, and also lone players, lone actors, distressed and angry individuals who can harness the technology to do harm, and also can occasionally have the reach which is quicker and harder than the policing and the military counter strategies that are available. Big countries like India, with a massive population and a very stretched policing and military environment. You can't have your people in every location, and they can't be keeping eyes on every individual or every small group that may wish to do harm.
Moreover, I would like to know, in your views, which country is actually leading the AI?
Well, I think it's a little bit like a beauty contest. There are many countries that have reputations for cutting edge technology, and we know, of course, that the People's Republic of China, the United States, the United Kingdom, and to a lesser extent, Russia, have got significant capabilities. But one of the challenges, but also one of the opportunities, is that with a very short life cycle, with various new emerging technologies, with new ideas, new developments, new breakthroughs in technology occurring, you're finding that smaller countries with deep high tech capability, countries like Taiwan, countries like Israel, countries like Germany, there are real pockets of excellence. And this is where a country like India has some significant opportunity in the same way that India is a major player in what we call STEM, the science, technology, engineering um, area of education and research. So many young Indians go overseas for their more higher level qualifications and they stay overseas. It's developing a homegrown industry where researchers, thinkers, and engineers and technicians can work to create a domestic capability, which of course doesn't take away the requirement from countries in uh, the Indian Ocean region to also access first class, top of the range military technology from friends. And of course, we know that India makes a significant financial investment in its military and policing. But of course, it, it is sometimes a bottomless pit. Every general and every senior police commissioner always wants more money because they can use it and they can put it to good use. And I think that's one of the challenges for the politicians and the policy advisors. It's finding the balance.
Moving ahead, I have another follow-up question. That is, recently we have seen the Iranian Supreme Leader's website posted a video about former President Trump's assassination attempt that was through a drone in a similar way US did with Iranian General Soleimani. But what your views on this? If a state is
Look,
using such things for the assassination purpose?
I think the reality is that we have um, a necessity to be resilient civil societies. And part of that is to protect and preserve the democratic process. Um, India is one of the great success stories when it comes to a perseverance with democracy, a perseverance with building a civil society. It has been able to do that in the face of significant pressures. There's been conflict with Pakistan, there's been conflict with China, there's been intercommunal um, and regional uh, difficulties where the tone of politics and the tone of the debate has meant that there are pressures on India's national and federal system of government. Having regional neighbours, they don't even have to be across the border from you, uh, who have a reputation for supporting aggressively political movements, activists, and many of individuals who do fall into a more terrorism category is not a good thing. We've seen from countries like North Korea and Iran that they do have a global reach and they have a reputation for behavior which undermines both the rules based order and also cause regional and international tensions. India is now a big player in what I would say is the emerging security framework that we have. You've seen the Quad initiative with the United States, India, Australia, and Japan emerge. That has caught the attention of the People's Republic of China, but it's also caught the attention of those countries in Southeast Asia and the countries that border India. There's also a recognition that countries like the United Kingdom and India have legitimate interests and national perspectives regarding the Gulf, the Middle East, and the Indian Ocean. The recent carrier task force that travelled from the United Kingdom into the Indian Ocean and across all the way north of Australia through the Taiwan Straits to Japan indicated a preparedness for the Royal Navy to return to those warm waters where they have a long tradition of engagement, collaboration, joint training, joint exercises with the Indian Navy, for example. So things are moving very quickly in this geopolitical space.
So moving ahead to the different facet of the technology, to end-to-end encrypted messengers, that has been one of the major achievements of this century. But it came with a price. A lot of terror activities which actually took place. For an example, in 2020, there were some terror attacks in France, and when French authorities investigated, they found that the entire thing was done over the end-to-end encrypted messengers. So that is one thing where even the government can't reach. But on the other hand, if even they are trying to reach, that would be like breaching privacy for common users. Always there is two different facets of the same story, that you have to protect the citizens without breaching their security. So how you see the use of encrypted messengers in the terrorism, and how the counterterrorism measures could be taken against this?
Your question raised some very good points. There is a balancing act between the requirements for governments to care for their total population and to provide operational and technological solutions to their counterterrorism, policing, and military infrastructure. A report in late 2019 that was commissioned by RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute, the think tank of the United Kingdom's Ministry of Defence, looked at the conflict in Jammu and Kashmir and the convergence of technology and terrorism recruitment. A classic finding was that the encrypted communication platforms were all providing the opportunity for political extremists to approach and recruit individuals, and state and central governments were constrained. They had little ability to counter these initiatives because both objectionable propaganda content could be removed, but often not fast enough, and violent mobilization based on online content was a real issue for law enforcement. A good example was WhatsApp is a very popular platform in India, and being able to utilize the platform to mobilize, indoctrinate, and recruit activists is a real-time problem for a government like India's, which has internal counter-terrorism challenges. Internet shutdowns by the state are largely ineffective. Platforms have such reach, and content sharing is rife. So there is a requirement for governments and the social media giants to talk in a very direct way, because technology companies and civil society organizations need a conversation. Also, there is a possibility that counter narratives can be developed so that opinion leaders in community, teachers, religious leaders, social workers, in addition to civil service organisations and government agencies, can discredit and undermine the messages of terrorism on the internet. The mechanisms to defeat extremism will require technological components. We cannot say to ourselves, we won't tackle the big tech giants. That is a fight that governments of all persuasions and in all countries will need to have.
Moving ahead, I'm going to talk about the another facet of technology. We can say another milestone of technology we have achieved in this decade. I'm talking about blockchain. Blockchain enabled encrypted currencies or the cryptocurrencies. Many of them are there, like Bitcoin, uh, Ether, and several other currencies are there. And this actually provided an additional space to money launder for terror activities like fundraising, illegal drug and arm trafficking, remittances and transfer of funds, attack funding, and operational funding. So it's very new thing, even for the policymakers, even for the corporations. Many governments are still in the dilemma if they have to allow the use of cryptocurrency or not. Like to provide an example, an attack in France in 2020, the government found that entire planning was made on the messengers like WhatsApp, and all the finances were made through the cryptocurrencies. So that is another challenge which is in front of government as well as in front of the civil society. How you think of this?
Well, I think the cryptocurrencies are a fascinating reality of where technology is driving opportunity. And human nature says that people who can make a profit will seek out opportunities to make a profit. The challenge, though, for government and for agencies is that these sources of finance are incredibly important and favorable to extremist groups. And there is a long standing research commitment by central governments, central banks, and the private banking sector to manage the risks. The problem is that the technology is racing faster than the policymakers can create structures to mitigate the risk. I think we just have to accept the fact that unless there are technology solutions created in the private sector to deal with this, governments will always be playing catch up.
Thank you all for listening to us. This was Noel Hadjimichael, who has briefly elaborated all the different threats and the countermeasures, what we should be looking into. These were the very crucial remarks by him, which will actually enable policymakers as well as the academia, people of civil societies to gain more knowledge about such countermeasures and get into the debate what exactly should be within the reach of the government and the private organizations. Thank you all for watching.